On today's episode, I am beginning a new series called Faith Fuel, which I'm really excited about. This is part one, and I'm going to be talking about fuel for your work. So much like whenever you're training for a race, call it a half marathon, much like your diet isn't the only thing to get you to the finish line, it is your foundation to get you to the finish line, much like faith. And whether you consider yourself a person of faith or not, wherever you are, however old you are a person just like I am, and I believe we're all created to be people of faith, and you probably actually practice a little bit of faith, even if you don't even recognize you do so. I think this will be applicable for everyone, and I think this episode will be a good resource for you. And again, this is part one. I think I'm going to do 3 parts to this series, so this is kind of just tip of the iceberg, but I think this will be a valuable resource, both the first half and the second half. I'm going to be getting into a little bit of scripture from the Bible, which I think will be really good. So also, I'm going to be talking about faith. Almost, you can look at it as a macronutrient. So much like protein, carbs, fats nourish your body, faith kind of nourishes your heart, your mind, your soul, your very being. And without faith, much like if you took one piece of your macros out of your diet and your body would break down, so it is, I believe, with faith. Take faith out of the equation. You don't continuously fuel yourself with faith, then also maybe your body won't necessarily break down, but I think kind of your very being and your health of who you are will start potentially breaking down. So looking at faith as a nutrient, as a fuel source. So I'm excited. Let's get into it. Thanks, guys. Today's show is sponsored by you guys. Please support the show by whatever means feels right for you. You can support financially by following the PayPal link in the show notes. You can like and share the podcast page on Facebook and Twitter, and you can for sure subscribe and leave a review on iTunes to make sure you get the latest episodes fed right to your computer or smartphone. Thanks for your trust and continued support. Appreciate you guys tuning in. I am super excited about this topic. I'm doing something I've never done before in all of these 8 episodes today. I know it's a really big deal. I'm going to start a series, and it's going to be a 3-part series, I think. I don't actually know exactly where I'm going with it. I've kind of brainstormed ideas, but I feel pretty good about it. And the series is called Faith Fuel. And I think it's going to be a really powerful podcast series for you guys, a really useful tool. Now, certainly some of you listeners, you're into kind of church and you're into faith culture. And faith is like something you say and a term you use on a daily or weekly basis, okay? And some of you don't. Some of you don't talk about faith. I know it can be a difficult thing to talk about because, and I'll get to it more in a session 2 or 3, but it's believing in what's kind of unseen. Now, there's some misconceptions about that I'll try to clear up, but essentially faith is believing what's unseen. You don't say, the sky is blue. I have faith the sky is blue, because it's pretty obvious. The sky's blue to pretty much anyone watching, unless they don't understand what blue is and they think blue is red. What if some kindergarten teacher, when you were younger, kind of misled you with all the colors, and like the principal never knew, and like all that, and you grew up like for a year or longer thinking that like blue was red, green was purple, and like pink was orange or whatever, and that'd be terrible. You'd have to really try to undo that damage. But faith essentially is believing what's unseen. And today's Faith Fuel, part 1, is subtitled Work. So I've got a phrase that has really fueled me in some challenging seasons. Certainly if you're a go-getter, probably any season is challenging. There's really no off-season, right? Like some of you play football, lacrosse, softball, track, cross-country. If you're one of the greats, more than likely, unless you're just uber blessed and you're a stud beast and you just don't have to train at all during the off season, usually the off season is where you really get stronger, and like the season is the easy part. So if you're kind of a go-getter, you're working all the time. And I mean work, I don't literally mean just going to work. Like some of you might have a job, and whether you're a teenager just trying to get gas money, or you literally have a career like I do, and doing this in my spare time here. And so you need things to fuel your work. Now, so there's 3 macronutrients. There's protein, carb, fat, okay? So, and I'm pretty into fitness kind of thing. triathlon. And so I used to study this stuff a little bit on my own. I don't have a degree in it, but carbs and protein have 4 calories. Fats have 9. Is generally at least what I was taught. So if you look on the back of a nutrition label and see the calories, you should be able to add up the grams of fat, grams of carbs, grams of protein. Do those multiplication factors, and that's how many calories are in that item. So we're kind of taught how to fuel your body. You're generally taught how to fuel your body pretty well, but that is not all to the story. And I believe everyone actually has faith to some extent. Everyone expresses faith in their actions. For instance, you go to school to some degree because you believe your life will be better by going to school than not going to school. Now, some of you probably cut school or whatever, go behind your parents' back. I don't know. Hopefully not. Surely not. Surely young folks don't do that. But generally, you go to school because you think it's going to be better for you. You have faith that your life will be better by going through the pain of going to school than skipping school and dealing with parents, taking away privileges. Maybe they'll take away phone, or maybe you're just not under your parents' roof, under the laws and rules of your parents, and you're in college. And certainly, I know how college people do. I was in college not that long ago, graduated 4 years ago, and one of the fun parts was visiting the normal colleges. I went to a military college called the Citadel, and one of the fun things was like on spring break or weekends, I got to go to some of the other colleges like Clemson or maybe USC. Usually I went to Clemson, and I got to see normal college life a little bit, and their weekdays were like a weekend for me. It was crazy. So they didn't always go to class, and for a lot of them that meant a 5th year of college. So I'd suggest going to class. But you exercise faith just by going to school. You think it's going to be better for you. And so this is the phrase that I use to fuel me. So I want you to tune in. This is the phrase that I think will clear up some misconceptions, which is what I want to do in this first half of this podcast. It'll be a halftime and then second half. So the phrase is this: faith does not replace work, faith fuels work. I'll say it again. Faith does not replace work, faith fuels work. So I think there's a misconception with people that have faith, especially amongst people who don't have faith. People who don't, affiliate with a religion or whatever, generally look at religious people and think that they're just not hard workers, that faith is a crutch, this and that, think they're lazy maybe. And certainly there's lazy people whether you're in faith or not a person of faith. I don't think there's really a correlation between faith and laziness. Actually, I think people of faith are pretty darn hardworking, and I'm going to get to that. But I think there can be an attitude that some people will use faith as a crutch or as an excuse not to work. And again, there may be some of that, but generally I don't agree with that. Generally, people of faith are hardworking. So faith fuels your work. So I'll give a couple of examples. For instance, the kind of room, if you're watching YouTube, the room that you're watching, I'm at my dining room table, kitchen's in the background. Maybe I can even find an old photo and maybe flash up maybe what it used to look like. But I did all the renovations to this home, and it was very difficult because I was living in this home with, construction everywhere. Literally everywhere. Like it was like a maze. You know what I mean? Like everything was on the floor, like tools, ladders, supplies, molding, tile, hardwood flooring. It was like a maze, and it evolved because, it was different phases of the project. So I read at least one book, primarily one book on flipping homes, and I'm pretty, I like designing, I like modeling, using math and science because I'm an engineer, so that's what I do. So I basically modeled kind of a schedule, kind of a cost estimate, and read the book on flipping homes, and I basically flipped this home that I live in, and it took a lot of work, let me tell you. And some of you may be in that age soon where you're going to be looking for a home to maybe purchase. Now, at some point I'll probably get into some rules that I would encourage you with on finances to get there, because student loans will cripple you. And I know many a friend who are still paying student loans, and many people just take forever to pay them. So I'm very blessed. I didn't have to pay student loans. I had a scholarship, an academic scholarship for college. So it really set me on a good path to be financially free and do the things that I'm doing. But let me tell you, being a one-man team, except for the lights, if you're looking on YouTube and there's lights in the kitchen, I didn't install those. I did do the AutoCAD plan, though, for where they should go. So that was kind of fun. I'll take a little bit of credit. But it took a lot of work, and it took a lot of faith that my work would not be in vain. The faith in and the vision for what I believed it would look like, and just the belief that it would work out, that investing is about $10,000. Investing that $10,000 and putting in 15 to 20 hours a week on top of my 40 hours of work. That was a huge sacrifice, but I believe that input would produce an even greater output, and I believed it would be worth it. So that faith really fueled me, and I'm talking probably at least 5 months of just living in a bare bones place, and it's worked out, at least to now. So certainly I'll still continue doing some improvements and things of that nature, always on the incline. But that'd be one example, somewhat recently in my life. Now let me turn to racing. So I'm kind of big into triathlon and training, and I know some of you guys are too, whether you do cross country or track. Maybe your school even has a triathlon team. That'd be really cool. Or you just play some other team sports, which is awesome. I did several team sports in high school. And so I'm going to use a half marathon as an example. So let's say all of a sudden you decide you want to do a half marathon, and you have faith that you can do a half marathon. Obviously, fairly obviously, that faith alone won't get you to the finish line, right? That faith alone won't get you to the finish line. Faith is key, but faith will fuel your work to put in the tremendous amount of work to get to that finish line in the half marathon. You may have to train 6 months. You may have to run 3 or 4 times a day. Well, not times a day. That'd be impressive if you do 3 or 4 times a day. 3 or 4 times a week to, for 6 months to get prepared for that half marathon. And that means a lot of physical pain, dealing with the soreness, maybe shin splints. You probably have to buy a new pair of shoes. Certainly financial resources. You're going to be eating more, right? Eating is good. Don't be afraid of eating. And you're going to have to develop a lifestyle that will probably be a little bit different than what you're used to if all of a sudden you decide you want to do a half marathon, which is 13.1 miles for those who may not know what half marathon is. And let me tell you, a lot of people do half marathons. Probably primarily adults. The number of people from 18 to 70 is a lot more than from 12 to 18, obviously. So, but students, you can do a half marathon. I don't see why not. I know some students that run 10 miles at least once a month, or whatever. People in cross country, I'm sure they can run a lot more than a 5K, which is 3.1 miles. So, let's say you want to do a half marathon. Faith will be your foundation for getting to that finish line. Just believing that you can. And I'm going to get to that in part 2, about the you can part. So stay tuned. Part 2 is going to be really good, I think. No guarantees. I haven't recorded part 2 yet. And when I say part 2, I mean the second half of this podcast. Hopefully part 2 of this series will also be good. So the faith that it will work well for you, is the foundation. That will fuel you. It's like the fourth macronutrient. You have to continuously feed yourself faith, give yourself faith fuel to do the training, and to work yourself through that process of getting prepared for whatever that goal is. So I'm saying a half marathon, but life is a race, and the finish line is ever changing. You think you get to one finish line, then it moves on you. You want to do something else, or you get some setbacks. And the ability to endure is a huge quality to start developing, no matter how old you are. I'm telling you, no matter how old you are. I don't know if you're probably a teenager, but I'll just assume you're younger than me unless you're a parent, which is totally fine. The ability to endure, if you start to understand that early on and develop that, whether that's, run your race, whatever it is. If you like swimming, then do swimming. If you like biking, do biking. I just was never good at any one thing, so I got into triathlon. So hopefully my being average at everything kind of adds together to being, above average. I don't know if that math works out, but it's worked out okay so far. So whatever your race is, faith will be that foundation to do the work and have fun with it too. Having fun in whatever that race is a key. That's a big key too. So, but the belief that it will work well for you is huge. That will fuel you to do the work. And so even maybe think like this. So you're listening to this podcast right now, which thank you. And I can even guarantee I'm 100% right that all of you are listening to this podcast right now. I can guarantee I am exactly right. None of you are not listening to this podcast right now, which is huge. So if you have a mathematical mind like me, now I don't really do this a ton, but it'd be an interesting way to think about it. That you could subscribe a faith, call it grams of faith or whatever, if you wanted to think like that, to everything you listen to. So maybe it's listening to music, maybe it's listening to this podcast or a podcast like this, maybe it's going to church, maybe it's having a conversation with a mentor. One way to think about it could be subscribe a grams of faith that you are consuming from listening to that source, that resource, or going to that event. Does it build your faith or does it tear you down? And just like your body needs protein, carbohydrates, fats, you definitely need some of those. You need your very being, call it your heart, call it your soul, needs grams of faith and needs constant. You can't just have one big overdose of faith and that's going to work for you. Now, maybe you're just like a bear or whatever. A lot of guys probably like to think of themselves as a bear. Maybe you can just consume, just overdose on faith, and then go into hibernation or whatever. I don't know. I just thought of that just now, so I don't know. But that probably won't work. I mean, bears do that because they're consuming all this stuff and then they go into hibernation. They don't do anything. So yeah, you can consume all the faith you want if you don't do anything about it. Yeah, because you're not going to be using it. But working requires a lot of energy, especially if you're trying to do big goals and fulfill big dreams. And it takes time, for sure. You're not just going to say, oh, I'm going to fulfill this today. Usually fulfilling a big dream just means taking a step in the right direction today, and all those steps add up. But whenever you are working towards something, you are going to be spending tremendous amounts of energy, both energy from your body and just mental, physical, like I said, and spiritual energy. And it's going to take a lot out of you, and you're going to need to find fuel sources, faith fuel sources, to keep you moving in that positive direction. I'm telling you. And when I was in high school, so I'll just kind of go through the seasons. Middle school, I was kind of in a church, did some small group stuff, but it kind of went a little bit over my head, maybe. I definitely think it gave me a foundation, but I was not what you would consider a Christ follower in middle school. I had plenty of problems, just like everybody else in middle school. So I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say anything really came to fruition at that time. That was just sort of preparation time. High school, I went into hibernation. Let's stick with that verbiage. Went into hibernation as far as faith goes, and didn't really go to church really at all in high school. And Sunday was my work day to make gas money. Some of you can relate. But that's no excuse. I mean, a lot of churches have services on Saturday, or just go to a different church that has service on Saturday. Or just, with YouTube and other resources and podcasts being so big, just find other resources and listen to them at your own leisure. That's a huge thing that now there's really no excuse as long as you have an internet connection and the hardware to take advantage of the internet connection. There's really no excuse for not building yourself up. Unless you just choose to spend that time in other ways, which is totally fine. You can't just build yourself up all the time necessarily. You gotta enjoy life. A phrase that I like to use, whatever it's worth, is life is too short to take serious, but too valuable not to. Life is too short to take serious, but too valuable not to. So there's a fine line. So in high school, wasn't really into faith and Christianity at all. And in college, got back into it. Got back into it pretty hard because college was definitely the most challenging. Definitely physically, and I'd even say just holistically. College, military college, with the medical deal and CAH that I had, and just pride, and it's just a challenge. It's meant to be a challenge. If you go to a military college and it's not a challenge, they're doing it wrong. And I definitely took advantage of additional challenges that the school offered and came out and really enjoyed the experience, but it was definitely a challenge. And so maybe that's probably potentially why I started to get back into faith. But purpose, definitely wanting to understand purpose a lot was a huge part of it. And so really got back into it in college, partially just because I want to see a lot of people, normal people who didn't wear a uniform all the time and march around and all that stuff with shaved heads. And partially because it became really enriching for me. And that's just me. Some churches you may go to, and you may just hate it, okay? I get it. I mean, over my life, I've probably gone to, consistently, I'd say over my life, I've probably gone to maybe 4 churches. If you include other Seacoast campuses, maybe 6. So, and certainly not every church is different. So, that's a part of church. But you got to find what works for you, and community is a big deal too. So, if you want to find a church, community will play a big part. So, but faith fuel, look at faith not just as this thing that people use as a crutch, and certainly I'll even get to some Christian applications of faith. I'm kind of talking in general about faith because, like I said, I believe everyone exercises faith in some way, somehow, even if you don't know it. You're kind of accidentally exercising this broad topic of faith. So be aware of it. Be aware of how you're exercising faith and build that faith. Build it, fuel it. And whenever I think of fuel, for some reason, when I thought of this title, I thought of like fuel packets. You know what I mean? So in races, you'll typically carry like these 120 calorie little fuel packets, and along the race, you'll be at, usually you won't have one until maybe mile 3. You usually take about 100 calories every half hour or so. You can maybe stomach about 300 calories an hour in a race if it's a long race. If it's a half marathon, you don't need 300 calories an hour. But in Ironman, you generally want at least about 300 calories an hour during the race. And so in these long races, I'd say a half marathon is probably where it starts. You may carry these fuel packets, and that's a lot how life is. Sometimes you'll be down, you'll be feeling really bad. You'll be getting to the end of kind of where you think you can go at that point in time. I mean, it just happens. Some of you are going through it right now. And you've got to find your faith fuel. You've got to find that fuel source, that little jolt to get you through. You don't necessarily have to overdose on it, because if you overdose, again, you may just go into hibernation or whatever, like bears do. You just get so full. Maybe that works with faith. I don't know. You can make your own interpretation. So, but that's a lot how life is. You got to carry those packets in your back pocket. Where do you go to find your faith fuel? So you find your fuel for your pantry, for your fridge, or your parents do, at the grocery store, or at the local Moe's, or I don't know, where else y'all, the chicken fillet, Chick-fil-A, Christian chicken, maybe you go there. And so y'all know where to fuel your body, but where do you fuel kind of your inner being, right? Your body's just a piece. Your body's just a piece, and I can't go fully into that right now, but there's so many components to who we are and what we are. So start being aware of it. Think about, do I need to find some more faith fuel? And how do I get the most healthy faith fuel and the most nutritious faith fuel? I'm telling you. And start thinking about it now, wherever you are. Maybe you're 15, maybe you're 18 or 21. And maybe some of this is just totally like new topic for you, new terrain, okay? I'm telling you, get in the habit now, and in a few years, when you start getting the habit now, it'll be ingrained in your habits, and that's when it'll take off. That's when you're not just fixing situations, but you're fixing the system, and it'll be huge. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to take a break, and when we get back, I'm going to be talking a little bit about a verse in the Bible that's pretty key to today's show, and I don't know, a little bit more discussion. We'll see where it goes. So thanks, guys. Let's take a break. Hey, guys. So during this halftime, I'm going to do a quick demonstration and exercise on finding out how many calories and what type of calories you should be consuming, or rather what I should be consuming. So I'm going to do a quick little exercise on myself. So we're talking about faith fuel and nutrition on this episode. So I want to give kind of a very practical
application on not just faith fuel, but actual fuel, actual fuel on how to be the best person, the best athlete, how to get yourself in a healthy physical situation. So a thing that I'm going to go through right now is the basal metabolic rate, BMR. I think it's called basal. Maybe it's called basal. I don't know. Basal metabolic rate. So that's your base metabolic calories, how many calories your body burns just by breathing, just by living. So I like active.com. So I'm going to go here, follow this link. So you can go to this website too on your own if you want to. And so we're going to go, so the top says basal metabolic rate is the number of calories required to keep your body functioning at rest. BMR is also known as your body's metabolism. Therefore, any increase to your metabolic weight, such as exercise, will increase your BMR. So basically that's saying that whenever you exercise, not only do you burn calories during exercise, but your basic metabolism increases and you burn more calories even while you're not exercising. So the magic of exercise. So I'm going to calculate BMR. So I'm going to say I'm a male. I'm 5'8". Well, I could lie on this, just say I'm really tall, but that is what I am. About 160 pounds. Pretty light right now. Age 26. And I'll hit calculate. All right, so that's saying my BMR is 1750 calories per day basic metabolic rate, which actually I think that's kind of low. So it says that's provided by using averages. So this doesn't necessarily take into account if you exercise a ton. So obviously people who exercise 2 or 3 hours a day, their BMR is going to be way higher than someone who exercises 20 minutes a day or a week. So actually, I usually consider my BMR to be about 2,500, at least whenever I'm doing Ironman training. I consider just breathing to be 2,500. So that says 1,750. I'll roll that. And so the other thing that I'll do, so another thing you can do is you can look up, let's look up calories burned by activity. All right. And so I'm going to go to this site. It looks like a government site. I don't know. Maybe it's trustworthy. We'll see. And you can see averages on calories burned for activities. So let's take jogging. 5 miles an hour. So I think that's a 12-minute pace, if I'm doing that math right. Not quite super fast. But that says in 1 hour, let's call it 600 calories an hour. So let's say that I train an hour. Well, let's say they exercise 2 hours of that a day. Or, call it an hour, but twice as fast. So let's say that exercise burns another 1,200. So if I'm doing the math, that's 1,750 plus 1,200. So that's 2,950. So that's 2,950 calories for me for one day. And so then the question will be, how many calories should I get from fats, carbs, and protein? So those are 3 macronutrients. There's a ton of micronutrients. That's generally why you want to eat things that are green, salads. They don't produce a lot of macros, but they produce a lot of micros. And I'm a big fan of macros. Some people may not be, especially if you're trying to get bigger. If you're trying to get bigger, like put on muscle mass, micronutrients may not be that useful for that application, but for being healthy, macros are huge. I'm not going to be talking about micros, but that's just want to throw that in there. So what percentage of macros? So I'll just say for me, I was looking back on some charts that I made, which I'm not going to get into, but in college, for a couple of my races, I did logs of how many calories I was eating and what percentage of fats, carbs, and proteins I was eating. And looking back on it, I was most successful during my heavy training by eating 50% of my calories from carbs, 30% of my calories from fats, and 20% of my calories from proteins. So just doing a quick calculator. Let's pull up this calculator thing. So I rounded my daily calories to 3,000. So obviously 50% of those is going to be 1,500 calories from carbs. So there's 4 calories per gram in a carb. So I'm going to divide that by 4. And that means I need to eat 375 grams of carbs per day. So I'm going to write this down in case I want to say it again. 375 grams of carbs per day. So you can look up, bread. I want to say bread probably has about 120 calories a slice. So that's probably 30-ish grams of carbs per slice. So theoretically, I could eat like 12 pieces of toast or whatever, which may not sound a lot, but toast is pretty heavy carb. So I think I did that math right. Then I'll do fats. So fats is a little different because it's 9 calories each. How do I clear this? So I said 3,000 total per day. And I said, what did I say? 30% is fats. So times 0.3. So 900 calories from fats. So, of course, divide that by 9 is 100 grams of fats per day. So that may be one of the most surprising things to people, 100 grams of fats per day. Because we're taught, growing up, I think generally, maybe it's changing, but when I was growing up, we were taught fats were the worst. We had this pyramid, and, people my age learned about the food pyramid, and fats are at the top. You want to eat very few fats. Now we have this My Plate thing, I think, and I don't really know much about it, but maybe it's changing. But I think whenever people hear 100 grams of fats, they think, oh my gosh, that's how you get fat. Let me tell you, fats are your friends, especially if you're doing endurance training. You want your body to burn fats, to learn how to burn fats. And so you have to eat fats to get your body used to learning how to burn fats. So 100 grams of fats, that's pretty standard. Let me tell you, I've gone years eating plenty of fats, healthy fats usually. So generally you want most of your fats to come from plant sources or healthy oils. So generally you don't necessarily want all your fats from animals. And then the last thing, clear this calculator. 3,000 times 0.2. So that's 600 calories from proteins. So divide that by 4. So I want to be eating about 150 grams of proteins a day. Now that will fluctuate. If you go to, you can Google, I think some averages are something like 0.8 times your weight is, I think, one rule of thumb, or just 1 gram times your weight in pounds is a rule of thumb. If you're doing really heavy, if you're a guy trying to put on weight, then, you may want to start scaling to about 1.5 grams per your body weight of grams of protein per day. So, for instance, if you're 160 pounds, 1.5 of that would be 160 plus 80, 240 grams of protein, which that can be pretty difficult. So 240, I think I said, divide that by 5 meals. That means every meal I need 48 grams of protein. So that's challenging if you're trying to hit that 1.5 grams of protein per pound of body weight. So but most people aren't in that situation quite on that scale. So those are just some rule of thumbs. That's just quick exercise that I could apply to me, and any of you can follow by going online, doing these simple searches on how you should maybe be eating for performance, whether you're an athlete or you just want to be healthy. And let me tell you, if you aren't an athlete and you get really healthy, you may become an athlete, let me tell you. So being fit and active is a lifestyle. It's not just necessarily an identity. It's not just being a part of a team. It's, I think, being a part of being a person, having this body and wanting to be healthy. Whenever you're healthy, you can do a lot more things. So I think that's about all I got for this quick demonstration on nutrition. And let's get back to some of the faith fuel. Thanks, guys.
All right, guys, and we are back for round 2. I got to figure out a better word for how to split the first half. Maybe I'll just call it the second half show. Something. I don't know. All right, whatever we're going to call it, we're here. So this part's going to be, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read a chapter of the Bible. So, not a chapter, a verse of a chapter of the Bible. So, faith fuel, talking about faith fuel, and if you didn't notice, I spelled faith fuel with a 4, a 1, and a 3 in the words and the title. Now, if you saw that and you were, or if you let's say you didn't see that and you're hearing me say that and you're thinking, where 4, a 3, a 1, where do those belong? What do you mean? You're probably older than me for one. You're probably a parent. So if you're of a of my generation, younger generation, or whatever, you probably know where kind of the 4, the 1, and the 3 belong in the words faith fuel. So, faith fuel, 413. 413. I want that to be kind of a banter of course, this show, but also this series. It's going to be, it's huge. It's a big deal, really big deal. So I'm going to read a chapter. Why do I keep saying chapter? A verse, chapter, verse. So if you're kind of new to what Bible stuff is, 4:13. 4 is the chapter. 13 is the verse. Okay, kind of elementary-ish stuff, but some of you just don't know. So I'm going to read from Phillipians. Now, Phillipians is a great book of the Bible. So a little bit of background, just a little bit. Paul, the Apostle Paul, he wrote most of what we call the New Testament. Now, again, just really basics. Matthew is the first book of the New Testament. There's Old Testament, New Testament. Old Testament's it's probably 10 times longer than the New Testament. It's a lot of history, wars, all this stuff. That's the Old Testament. Now, New Testament basically began with Jesus. So Christianity, it's based on both parts, but New Testament is all of sort of explicitly Jesus and what he said, and then what the apostles did after he died and was resurrected. So Paul, the Apostle Paul, I'm not going to get too much into him, but he wrote Philippians, and he wrote it to the church of Philippi that he established in the book of Acts, which is another book, and he wrote it when he was in a prison. So he was in prison, I think, maybe 3 times. You can look it up. But he just kept getting imprisoned. But I'm telling you, it's not like he was stealing. He was just imprisoned just for spreading the gospel, spreading ideas. See, people knew back then, and they maybe even knew more back then about this than now. But ideas are one of the strongest elements, one of the strongest forces, ideas. And people were afraid of ideas back then. All this was a very new idea, but a very good idea, and it survived over 2,000 years. So he wrote the book of Philippians to the church in Philippi, and he wrote it in prison, which is ironic because Philippians is generally considered the most joyful book in the New Testament. I mean, Paul's just full of joy. He's expressing his joy to the church that he established, thanking them for contributing to his ministry. He's a traveling apostle. I don't know if he did side jobs or whatever, but he had to have some way of making some income to pay for food, pay for whatever needs he needed. So it's the most joyful book, and I want to read 4:13, Philippians 4:13, and then I want to read the verses prior to it to give a little bit of context. But this is one of the most well-quoted verses in Christianity. So if you're in Christianity, maybe you already kind of know this, and if you're not, then hopefully this sets a good foundation for what a lot of Christianity is about. So if you're not a Christian, that's totally fine. I'd still encourage you to listen. So Philippians 4:13. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. I'll say it again. That's it. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. Now, some translations say I can do all things through him who gives me strength. Now, so that's where I want to clarify a little bit my interpretation, which I think is correct, but there's certainly differences in how people look at things. So Paul is he's kind of talking about the difficulties that he's gone through. I mean, he's a traveling apostle. In one of the other books, he talks about just all the things that, I mean, he went on and on for paragraphs about all the things he's gone through, getting shipwrecked, getting lashes, 41 minus 1 or whatever the number is that you're defined as dead. Getting that punishment, getting all kind of punishments. He talks about them. He talks about his endurance. Paul was a man of endurance. And so I'll just kind of back up a little bit to verse 10. I'll just read through verse 10 to 13. Let me start over. That word confused me. I rejoice greatly in the Lord that at last you renewed your concern for me. Indeed, you were concerned, but you had no opportunity to show it. I'm not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. So what he's saying is that, he's had good times, these bad times. He wasn't always an apostle. He kind of was trying to destroy Christianity before he became an apostle. Kind of ironic. And so, like most people, they've experienced the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. Now, if you're kind of young and you're a student, you probably have experienced in your own life many highs and many lows. But over the course of your life, you're going to look back at this season, and it probably won't be the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. You'll have many, many, many more. And I don't say that. I mean, that's just life, But it's exciting. It means that there will be even greater times than this if you're going through a good season. But there will be tough seasons. More than likely, there will be tough seasons. And you need faith fuel to get through those tough seasons, to do the work to get you through it. Now, some things may just kind of be a waiting game, in a sense. Some things are out of your control, like I've said. You can't control everything in your life. You can control your thoughts and your actions generally, but you can't control the results. And so not everything will be in your control, and you will have difficult seasons. So he's saying, I can do all this through him who gives me strength. So I want to clarify the way I interpret it. Many people say I can do all things through him who gives me strength. Okay? If you hear that, and that's not incorrect. If you hear that, though, the way that's worded, maybe it's just a language thing. The way that's worded, okay, well, what if I want to jump off a building and survive or whatever? I can do all things. What does that really mean? What does it really mean that I can do all things through him who gives me strength? What does it really mean? Let's say you want to run a half marathon tomorrow and you haven't really been training. I can do all things through him who gives me strength. Can you really get to that finish line? Is it really possible for you to get to that finish line? Maybe you can walk it. But what does it really mean? The way I interpret it, it doesn't literally mean I can do all things. It means I can bear all things to me. Now, that's just a slight kind of English language thing, I think. But what he's saying is, so let's say you want to do that half marathon or whatever race or event it is. It is more than likely possible for you to do it. You more than likely are capable of doing it. What you may not be capable in a sense of is doing the work to get through it unless you have a fuel source to do that work, to be able to make yourself able to do that event. So the work, you'll have to bear that pain of doing that work to prepare yourself to do that thing, whatever that thing is. Okay, so I'm using athletics kind of as the theme of this podcast, but it could be anything. So being able to bear and endure is what Paul is getting at. So it doesn't take a lot to bear good times, does it? I mean, whoever says, gosh, these times are just too good, I wish they were worse, what he's getting at is the times where things aren't great, where it is painful, where he is sick, where he is in pain, where he doesn't have all of his needs perfectly met. And he's saying, I can bear all this through Christ who gives me strength. And I'll just touch on that through Christ part, because again, I want this to be kind of general, but it obviously it's very Bible Christian backed, very Bible and Christian backed. But kind of in a nutshell, I'll touch on, so Christ, so the gospel is he was crucified and was raised from the dead, and that's kind of a demonstration that you can bear anything. You can bear torture, you can bear death and still have life. And he died for our sins to be redeemed and have freedom to have a relationship with our Creator who designed us, and we kind of have messed up the execution of what we were supposed to do, but we've been redeemed according to the gospel, and so we have that freedom. And so where we can draw that strength from is if you view everything kind of as in comparison to being crucified and being raised from the dead. I mean, this is just a small thing. Whatever challenge you're going through, okay, maybe you have a broken bone or something, or maybe you are down on your luck, whatever it looks like, or your grades aren't that great and you're having to get yourself out of the hole, okay? At least you're not being crucified today, right? At least you're not being crucified today. And not only in the gospel was Jesus Christ crucified, but he endured it and he came back to life through the Holy Spirit. Now, that is the gospel. It takes faith. There's a lot of accounts of seeing Jesus after he was raised from the dead. So either everyone's a liar, or whatever. But it comes down to faith. I mean, everything comes down to faith. Even you have faith that your teachers are teaching you correct information. Your school and you have faith that your textbooks are telling correct information, right? I mean, everything's faith. You put your faith in every little fact that you learn, because most things you learn secondhand. You don't get to test everything and see it with your eyes and feel it with your hands and smell it. Most things you learn in a classroom setting or reading, or you experience things and you make an interpretation on the truth that you draw from that situation. So, but the big idea there is you can bear all things through Christ, through faith in Christ. Now, you can certainly have faith, you can have general faith, and I want you to have general faith. As I already said, I think you already do to some extent. I think we're all spiritual beings, and I want you to have faith. But I will say, whatever it's worth, I don't think your faith will be complete unless you put your faith in Christ. But you figure it out. You figure it out, man. It's your journey. I'm just trying to tell you my journey to some extent. And I'll even share a very recent, it was actually yesterday, but by the time you listen to this, it'll be a recent experience. So I actually had to go to the hospital yesterday. I had to go to the emergency room, and I've shared, I have CAH, and I get dehydrated easily. Well, I get dehydrated more easily than the average person, and there's reasons for that, with salt wasting and that kind of thing. So anyway, I was just training this week, and it's really hot down here. I'm telling you, it's super hot. I'm not complaining because I do love kind of the heat and love going to the beach. Very blessed, but didn't get enough fluid and ended up having to go to the hospital yesterday. And it was pretty rough. Wasn't feeling very good at all, and was trying to get rehydrated. But sometimes when I get so dehydrated, my stomach just stops working. And again, there's reasons for that with the CAH that I have. So fluid wasn't moving, and I was getting more dehydrated, kind of literally by the second. And so I was telling my buddy we're about to get burgers, and told him, man, I'm sorry to do this, but I need to go to the hospital. I need to get an IV. And worst case scenario, I'll have to stay overnight, and they'll have to give me a cortisol boost, corticosteroid. And luckily they didn't. This may be the first time where I went early enough that I didn't wait until I needed an ambulance to come get me, and checked in on my own accord and got an IV and got better. Still not feeling great. Okay, let me be honest. This was less than 24 hours ago. I do not feel very great right now, but the faith fuel is in large part what gets me through those times, what kind of got me through yesterday, and just literally every day. I don't know what I would do without faith that it will work well for me. And yesterday was tough. It had been, 8 months since I last had kind of this thing happen, but luckily it didn't go into adrenal crisis where I would have needed that steroid, and usually it does. And the last time this happened, and I did need the adrenal steroid, my eyesight started going. I started, literally not being able to see. My memory started going. I couldn't really think straight. And it got pretty rough. This time, this was the easiest ER visit I've ever had. But it was still tough. I did not feel very good, and I had to make that decision to go to the ER, which is not an easy decision. I try to stay out of the ER, both primarily for financial reasons. I'll be honest. Those ER people, ambulance people, they are usually not kind to your wallets. But anyway, made it through. And experiences like that. If there's any, I'm kind of trying to think. I always grow from these situations. I think every time I have to go to the ER and kind of reflect on it. And this is still early. But as I reflect on these times, going to the hospital adds perspective, especially when you're the one ill. Okay, you can go to the hospital and you can be in perfect health. You're just going to visit somebody and you see all the other patients. But especially when you're the one that's ill and you go to the hospital, it adds perspective. And you start to realize how much of life is almost a joke, how we exaggerate the importance of some things. And and I'll probably even make an episode around this, but it's a mark of wisdom of knowing what's important and how important it is. And so many things that we think are so important that we put our faith in, that this is going to fulfill me. This is what I need. This is what I want. It's okay to want things, and you do need things. And to some extent, you might even need the thing that you think you need. I don't know. But whenever you're, I don't know if any of you, some of you, I'm sure, have had moments where you literally don't know if you're going to live. And that is a tough, whenever you do find yourself there. Because it's one thing to kind of think about being there, and it's another thing to actually have been there. And people who are enlisted in the military, I think, can get that too. There's different ways of feeling like your life is at risk. But whenever you have those moments where you feel like your life is at risk, nothing in the world really matters anymore. I mean, all that matters is to you is trying to live, and are you making the most of your time? And are you being a good friend to others? Are you taking advantage of this valuable life that you've been given? And if there's anything I can use this experience, a pretty lately experience, to add value to you guys and help you guys to see, I'm telling you, no matter how old you are, begin to see what's important in life and what culture tells you is important. And you should do this, you should buy this, you should have this app, you should have the best profile, you should be popular, you should be well liked, you should play this sport, you should not play this sport, whatever. None of that really matters. I mean, good Lord, it really doesn't even matter. It's foolish. And don't play those games. It's a trap, and it will lead you to destruction. I'm telling you. Realize what's important in life, and because most of it is a joke. And I just hope that maybe that sinks into somebody, and just evaluate where you are and what's important. And faith plays a big part in knowing and seeing what is important, and fueling you to work toward what you think is important. What's on your heart? What's on your heart? What do you want from life, for others? What do you want? And work toward that. It's okay to want things for yourself. That's totally fine. So work toward it. But how do you fuel yourself? More than just the consumption for your body and the academia for your mind. Fuel yourself with faith from shows like this, or I'm sure there's even better shows like this. I'm sure getting plugged into a church is going to be probably even more useful than something like this, but certainly it'll be a little bit more defined in whatever religion, Christianity or whatever, that for the church you're going toward. So faith fueled, that is huge. And again, let me reiterate Paul here. You can bear all things. You can bear all things through Christ, through the faith in Christ. And I can't really tell you can put your faith in something else. I don't even know what else you could say you could put your faith in to be able to literally be able to bear all things. I really don't know. Maybe you can come up with something that can be your interpretation. All I can really do in a show like this is kind of point you to Christ. And if you choose not to be pointed in that direction, that's your prerogative. But being able to bear all things, that is huge, and faith is that fuel that will allow you to do it. And the results will be incredible. And they won't be instant. You may not be able to get yourself out of whatever situation or get yourself into whatever good situation you want immediately. It may take time. It may take a lot of work. Like I said, the home construction project I did here took about 6 months. Not to mention the 6 months of living on a couch before I was able to move in. Not to mention, training for a half marathon, maybe call it 6 months. I guess I'm stuck on sixes right now. The 6 months of training, most things that are worth it don't come immediately. And delayed gratification, unfortunately, is something that is not in style right now. But I'm telling you, that is a key to big things, is slow, progressive steps. Endurance is not a sprint. Life is not a sprint. It's a marathon. And you have to be able to bear the pain and the challenge and the struggle. And just accept that things may not be easy. Things may not be easy, but by faith, you can believe that they're worth it. And that's the fuel. That's the fuel you need. I mean, that's it. That is worth more than a whole pie of pizza. That is worth more than a 18-inch Subway sub. What else is popular? Then a whole chicken nugget tray. I'm telling you. And it can be a lot longer lasting too. I tell people as far as food goes, because I can eat. I can throw down food, let me tell you. And I'm not a big guy. I can throw down food. In high school, we'd go to Miyabi's was the place. You kind of know what I'm talking about. The hibachi places they cook in front of you. I used to get, steak, shrimp, chicken with the 12 pounds of rice they give you and the veggies. I used to get it all. And I'd clear my plate, man. I'd be the only one. We'd take a picture every time. Take a picture. I wish I still had like an album of pictures of like cleared Miyabi plates. And it's funny, I tell people, I'm a food addict. I eat at least 3 times a day. And that's how you need to be with faith. You need to consume faith all the time. Keep that fuel source going. I'm telling you, it's not just a once a week thing if you are in church, and if you're not in church, then either find a church, get plugged in, talk to your pastors about faith and what it means, and find resources, find mentors, find help, find people to talk to. So again, my church does small groups. Maybe a small group's the kind of thing that you want to get plugged into, and get fueled. Otherwise, you're operating. It's like your body's operating on only 2 sources of the 3 macros. You can't just operate off of fats and proteins or proteins and carbs. You need all 3. I'm telling you. The Atkins diet, or there's little fat diets where you take one thing out. Maybe that works in short term for some people. Again, this is an endurance race, and you're looking for a lifestyle. You're looking for what can fuel you indefinitely to propel you into your purpose and what I believe God has for you. And how do you fulfill what you're supposed to do while you're here on this planet? Because all of you has a purpose. I'm telling you. When I was 17, 18, I had no idea necessarily I'd be doing the things that I'm doing. From career to where I live, to what I do on the side, to extracurricular, to races, to accomplishments. When you're younger, you have no idea what's in store for you. And by the same token, I'm 26. When I'm 36, I have no idea what when I'm 36, what the last 10 years is going to be. You just have no idea. But faith tells you you can bear the pain and the challenge and the struggle of getting there, and when you get there, it will be worth it. So that's all I got, guys. If you like this podcast and you're watching on YouTube, check out one of our other recent videos by simply clicking on the window on the screen. You can also easily subscribe by clicking on our snazzy icon also on the screen. Your support will allow the show to continue to grow and become even better. Thanks, guys.